I showed you what it looks like for the first 10 days of your food sensitivity protocol, but I didn't show you what happens after that. So let me just give you a real quick overview of what happens. So we'll go back to our very handy page 5 here, where we already talked about how in days 1 through 10 of your pinpoint quench restore food protocol that you will eat the foods that you have eaten for the past, at least on some basis, for the past couple of years, and hopefully that you also like for the first 10 days. So usually somewhere between 3 and 6 days, but it may take 10, maybe even a bit longer, but somewhere in there, you will begin to feel quite a bit better. In fact, the symptom survey that you filled out when you began your food protocol, that score will likely be halved by day 10. So if you started out with a score of, say, 88, it's going to be somewhere around 40, 44 by day 10. And I'll send you a little message when I see that, and I'll say, okay, you can start reintroducing foods. And so what you'll do is notice we have each of these categories here, and most of them have a little section called days 1 through 11. So you will choose one food from one of the categories, and ideally you'll eat a very small amount of that food in the morning and then a larger amount later in the day. Now, it doesn't always happen that way, but that's the ideal way to do it, because that way, if you have a reaction to that food, then you only ate a little bit, so the reaction would probably be lessened than if you ate a larger amount. Because, as you might recall, food sensitivities are dose related. So you'll add one new food per day, or perhaps you're going to go a little slower. One new food every 2 days, or even every 3 days, one from each category. And you might wonder, well, what's a reaction to a food? So a reaction would be the return of a symptom that went away. And often it is quite noticeable. So I liken it to before you started your food protocol, being in a crowded banquet room, somebody drops a spoon, you're hardly going to notice. But take that same banquet room and nobody's in there but you and one other person, and that other person drops a spoon. It's going to be really loud. That's how the return of a symptom usually is. It's going to be more immediate, perhaps, than it was before, but also it'll get your attention. So that's the return of a symptom. Usually we don't expect a symptom to return, but no test in the world is 100% accurate. So you want to test back in every single thing so you know what's happening. You'll do that days 11 through 20, fill out another symptom survey. I'll say, okay, go ahead and rinse and repeat. Days 21 through 30, one new food from each category, etc. Eventually, you'll get to 4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, whatever I told you, and you'll be able to add in foods that were not tested. So they didn't test black-eyed peas. I don't know why. They didn't test stevia, monk fruit, lots of things they didn't test. So those will also come back in one at a time. Even, and I'm going to switch back over here to the test results. Remember, you had some foods that you're having to avoid for 3 months, and some, these red ones, even 6 months. Eventually, those foods will also be added back in. So this is very, very important not to continue to avoid foods that you were reactive to. The reason we can bring these foods back in is because we asked your immune system what was bothering it, and the more reactive foods we're keeping out for longer. We can bring these back in. We will try them to see if it causes a symptom, but the reason we can bring them back in is because your immune system has memory. Since it has memory, that means it also forgets. So if you were having to avoid eggplant for 3 months, it's so high up there on the yellow, I may have even told you 4 months to avoid eggplant. And then in 4 months, you can try eggplant. If you don't notice any inflammatory symptoms, you can now eat it to your heart's content. The other thing that we'll be doing, and I'll show you another handout that I make for you. So this is called the Pinpoint Quench Restore Food Reintroduction Schedule. So the first page, I have the supplements listed that I want you to use to restore gut health. These are different for different people. I don't always have the same things, but our plan is to reduce the inflammation and then work on restoring gut health. And then the second page is just a reminder of how long you're having to keep out certain food chemicals that had to be taken out. And then also here, the foods that you get to add back in at 3 months and at 6 months. This is an amazing test and an amazing protocol that works really well with the test to get people feeling better quickly.